Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Jewish Gen Talk with Serena Rafe. Glad that you're with us. Please put in the chat where you're logging in from so we could see. We have people registered from around the world for today's talk, and we will wait just a little bit for people to get signed in, and then we will get started. Haleb in Dallas, Texas, and you have Yoel right here in New York. Yedra in Los Angeles. We have Renee in South Leon, Michigan. Someone from Madrid. David in Fairbanks, Alaska. We have William in Boston, Ann Rosenblum in Reston, Virginia, with Karen in Muncie, New York. We have Amit in Haifa in Israel. Thank you so much for being with us. Samantha in Austin, Texas. We have Ruth in Marina Del Rey. We have Jacob Rosen. Welcome. Thank you in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for being with us. We have Marvin in, not sure where, but welcome. We have Richard in London. Welcome to everybody who's joining us. Please post in the chat where you're logging in from. We're about to get started. We have Christina in Scotland, Sarah Weil in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for being with us today. That's Esther Khan from Melbourne, Australia. Wow, thank you for joining us. Big time difference. We have Rachel in Baltimore, Maryland, and Beth in Maine, and Branya Feldman. Berkeley says good morning, so good morning back to you. And we have people from Ben in Haifa and Yehudit in Israel, and we have Neville in Calgary, and people from all over the world. And we are really so happy that you're with us today. We're going to get started. We are joined today by Serena Rafe, who is, amongst many other things, the Associate Director of JewishGen's Sephardic Research Division. And she's going to talk to us today about post-1492 Sephardic Dispersion and a guide to Sephardic genealogy. And as you've probably all seen throughout various emails, JewishGen has been doing a lot of work in strengthening the amount of resources we have for people researching their Sephardic roots. And this presentation is just one more opportunity for people to learn. As always, Serena is happy to take questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A section on the bottom of the screen, and she will go through some of them at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded, and we will send that out hopefully shortly after the conclusion of the presentation. Just a little bit about Serena. Serena is a professional genealogist, editor of the journal Dorot, and a founder of the Sephardic Heritage Project. She is the author of Branching Out from Sepharad, which outlines the history of Jews in Spain, the 1492 expulsion, the history in Syria, and their immigration to the Americas. In addition to her role at JewishGen, she is the director of she is the co-chair of the Brooklyn Jewish Historical Initiative. She is a well-known author. She has published Backyard Kitchen, Mediterranean Salads. She has a cooking app. She is responsible for the translation and databasing of marriage and Brit Milah records on JewishGen, and is involved in many, many different other projects and other organizations. And it is really wonderful for us that she is involved with JewishGen and is speaking to us today. So Serena, I'm going to pass it over to you. I'm going to turn off my camera and mic, but I will be here if you need anything. And we thank you very much for being with us.
Okay. Let me know if this is posting correctly. Is that posting correctly?
You have to adjust your display settings. I still see the next slide.
Okay, swap. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. It's been a while since I've done a JewishGen presentation, but it's really exciting to see how many people really across the globe are logging in. It really makes me feel special. So today what we're talking about is what happened in 1492, how Sephardic Jews got really all around the world, and then talking about, things you can do to search your Sephardic genealogy. Avrami was kind enough also already to give you a brief introduction as to my credentials, so we won't go into that. We'll start right off with talking about Spain, what happened in Spain and what led up to it. So Jews started going into Spain. Really, we have um, data and we have information going back as early as the 4th century. But what we know is that Muslim Spain basically started around 711 with the Umayyad dynasty. The golden age of Spain is usually considered from the 10th and the 11th centuries. And Jews made a significant difference and really thrived during this period. We know that Maimonides, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, Nachmanides, they all produced really important works during this time period. We know that Hasdai ibn Shaprut, who was a Jew in the court of the Umayyad dynasty from 915 to 970, was an official who recognized and a recognized leader of Jews. He was a patron of Jewish learning. He was a statesman during that time, and he led and defended the Spanish Jewish community in Islamic Spain. The golden age of Spain was mostly during the 11th century, when Talmudic scholarship and Jewish philosophy, Hebrew poetry reached a peak. There was a Sephardic school on the Talmud that was formed in Lucena by Rabbi Alfasi, the Rif, in the 12th century, the 11th century, sorry. Maimonides, along with his teacher and his father, Rabbi Maimon, wrote the Code of Jewish Law during the 12th century. And one of the most important commentaries on the Chumash was written by Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, and was written during this time. This was a period really that has not been paralleled since. It was a period of Jewish scholarship, philosophy, and it was really never again equaled. Then let's go to Christian Spain. Now, Christian Spain was a completely different thing. Under Christian Spain, and understand that it wasn't Spain at this time, it was city-states, because countries as we know them today really didn't exist till much later. But in Christian Spain, in 1391, we begin to see pogroms. And these pogroms were mobs, they were government sponsored. Many Jews were forced to flee or to convert to Catholicism. And we start in June 1391, where a converso and an archdeacon incited mobs to attack Jews in Seville's Jewish quarter. And we go on 3 days later to Valencia, where on June 9th, the community was destroyed. 250 Jews were massacred. Then Palma de Mallorca, the entire Jewish community was killed in riots, and Jews who were not murdered were converted or fled to North Africa. Then just a month later, King Pedro of Valencia orders all the Jews who've been hiding to be allowed to return to their homes unmolested. He decreed that the synagogues were not to be turned into churches. And then he, after everything had kind of settled down, he confiscated the property of the Jews who had fled or been murdered. August, so see, this goes on in August to Barcelona and then to Castile. And this atmosphere of hate, of anti-Semitism, of rioting causes many Jews to convert and live secretly as Jews. But these new Christians could not live openly as Jews without fear of persecution. So there were many, many conversions during this period. So now we jump forward to 1479. And in 1469, we know that King Ferdinand II of Aragon marries Queen Isabella of Castile. They're married in Valladolid, which unites their kingdoms. Now, they were first cousins from the house of Trasimara. They were the reigning house of Castile, Aragon, and Portugal. But it wasn't long before they took back the last remaining Moorish kingdom of Granada in the south. So, sorry, I think I jumped forward. So understand that new Christians, Jews who converted to Catholicism, were not treated the same. And basically kind of what happened is that, let's say a husband converts but a wife doesn't, or one family converts, let's say a nuclear family, and then, but let's say the brother or a sister, which has a separate nuclear family, doesn't convert. Basically, the new Christians still had their same social group, or they had family members who may not have converted. So what changed for them, right? So maybe they're going to church on Sunday, they're not going to synagogue on Saturday, but there's parts of their social strata that are still the same. And what happened was the government, Ferdinand and Isabella, sought to separate Jews, new Christians from Jews, because even though they may have converted, they may still have the same social network. And what happens is that they start to separate it even further by declaring laws, a law called limpia de sangre, which is basically purity of blood. And it says that even though you've converted to Christianity, to Catholicism, you don't have the same status as someone who's born Christian. Someone who's born Christian, an old Christian, had different rights than a new Christian, someone who converted to Catholicism. So what happens is in 1481, now Isabella is greatly influenced by Torquemada, who's a priest, and he's a devout Catholic, and she, under his influence and with the blessing of the church, starts the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition is not to target Jews, it's to target new Christians who are not true to the faith. And they believe that people who are new Christians might not be true to the faith, and there are things about being a new Christian that they look for. For example, if you cleaned your house on Friday, if you swept towards the middle of the floor instead of sweeping out the door, if you used vegetable oil or olive oil versus using lard in your cooking. Things like that were things that they looked for and that would make you suspect and a target of the church, of the Limpia de Sangre laws. They begin to see that it's not successful, that just having Jews in the kingdom, they have to go. So they issue an edict of expulsion. The edict is for March 31st, 1492, which is right before Passover that year. At the end, they say, okay, July 31st. Columbus actually, people say we need a little bit more time, and they're able to move the date of expulsion to the end of July, but it actually happens August 2nd. And that actually coincides with the destruction of the first and second temple. So when you think about celebrate about that holiday and the fast that occurs every summer, know that added to the first and second temple should be the date of expulsion of the Jews from Spain. It was not formally revoked until 1968, following the Second Vatican Council. So this was in effect for 450, 470 years, something like that. This is what the expulsion order looked like, stamped by the king and queen. You can get this on the internet, it's easy to find. But now we look at where they went. So about half, we know, went to Portugal. The estimate is about 60,000 go to Portugal. And why Portugal? So Portugal needed a middle class, and so they welcomed them because they needed a middle class. They needed the artisans. they needed to drive their economy. A lot go to North Africa, they go to Italy, they go to countries around the Mediterranean, including the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire opens their arms and say, your loss is our gain. You know, you guys in Spain are dumb for getting rid of your Jews. We're happy to take them. It'll benefit the Ottoman Empire. And then some convert or go underground as conversos. And those from 1391 realize it's now 100 years later. It's 2 generations removed, but those people are still suspect. Okay, so this is a map, again, easily found on the internet, that shows the migration and settlements of Jews from Spain. And you can see that the initial migrations are basically all around the Mediterranean basin. The black lines show a later migration, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the initial migrations are either to Portugal or North Africa or throughout the Mediterranean. All right, so now all those people who went to Portugal have a problem because in 1497, the next king, not the same king, the next king, King Manuel, becomes engaged to marry Ferdinand and Isabella's daughter, also named Isabella. And a condition of the marriage is that the Jews of Portugal have to be expelled or have to convert, because Isabella says, you got to get rid of those Jews. But he doesn't want to get rid of his Jews because his economy is now thriving. He's got this great middle class. And so what he does is he issues the expulsion order. Everybody's gathered at the ports or in town squares. They're ready to leave. And sprinkle holy water. And he says, now you're converted. You're not going anywhere. But Portugal is pretty cruel because they take away the children they take away the children to re-educate them. They send those children to the Azores, and a lot of them die because there's disease and they're taken from their parents. So in 1536, the Portuguese Inquisition begins. Descendants of Jews from 1391 in Spain are now under suspicion. And crypto Jews have left Portugal for places with more lenient religious legislation and opportunities, and where their unique skill sets could thrive. So here we come into the Dutch. Dutch became one of the favored destinations in the Netherlands for Sephardic Jews because many of the refugees were traders, and Amsterdam benefited from their arrival. So under the influence of Sephardic Jews, Amsterdam grew rapidly. A lot left for Brazil because there was Portuguese-speaking people in Brazil. And understand that the Dutch Republic had seceded from Spain roughly around 1581. And so crypto Jews start reaching the Dutch Republic and places where the Dutch are strong. So why Amsterdam? What was so special about Amsterdam? First of all, there was religious tolerance. There were the Quakers. They were, very tolerant. Types of discriminatory laws they saw in other places were not in place in Amsterdam. And even if there were some laws, they weren't so strictly followed. Much of the tolerance in Amsterdam was rooted in the economic assets of the new Portuguese Jewish community. And we know that the Portuguese Jewish community, Spanish Portuguese synagogues, really start in Amsterdam. And the officials in Amsterdam and even residents were less susceptible to labeling these Jews by their negativity perceived in Christian tradition. So the Jews of Amsterdam really enjoyed a lot of religious freedom, and they really thrived in Amsterdam society. This is a synagogue. There were 3 synagogues formed in Amsterdam: Beth Jacob, Neve Shalom in 1608, and Beth Israel in 1618. In 1639, they all merged to form the Portuguese Jewish congregation. The congregation produced rabbis, scholars, theorists, artists, bankers, really leading international trading houses. Philosopher Spinoza was excommunicated by the congregation, but he was a product of the congregation. And I think we also need to understand that the Jews that came to Portugal, it was pretty much 100 years or several generations after they had gotten to Portugal. And what happens is that they had been living as understanding their Jewish roots, but not having any rabbinic leadership or rabbinic scholarship or any connection with rabbinic Judaism. So coming back to Amsterdam is their introduction to what it means to be kosher, what it means to celebrate Shabbat. Things like that were new to these people, and it took a couple of generations for them to really understand what it is to be Jewish. There's a really good book on it by Miriam Bodian called The Portuguese Nation. I strongly recommend it. So wherever the Dutch had holdings in the Americas, the Jews went. So one of those we know is Recife. Recife, Brazil, was there were sugar plantations there, and the Jews from the Netherlands went to the Antilles in the middle of the 17th century, and then the Dutch had captured Curacao from the Spaniards in 1634. So there were waves of Jewish and Protestant families from the Netherlands who had established shipping and trading settlements in Willemstad. Wherever the Dutch West Indies companies went, they went. By the 1680s, the Portuguese Sephardic community of Amsterdam was on the decline. A lot were going to the Americas. And the New World colonies were starting to thrive with Jews. So this is now a map that shows the dispersion of Sephardic Jews to the New World. So, you know, we talk about Columbus and his discovering the Americas. What we don't talk about is the fact that Columbus had conversos on his ship. He did things that were unusual for his time. He didn't have a priest on his ships when he sailed to the Americas. I know there's controversy over whether or not he was Jewish. Different papers seem to conflict on this, but the bottom line is there were a lot of things that happened. For example, he got the island of Jamaica, and he never allowed the church to step foot. He didn't allow the Inquisition on the island of Jamaica. So we know that Jews were heading for the New World or conversos were heading to the New World because they wanted to escape the Inquisition. They didn't think the Inquisition would follow them to the New World, but in fact, it did. And we'll talk about that. So Curacao dates from the 1650s. The first synagogue was purchased in 1674. I'm actually going to Curacao at the end of January. I can't wait to see the synagogue. We know that Mikveh Israel Emmanuel Synagogue, which was established in 1732, was the oldest in the Western Hemisphere that's in continuous use. It was modeled after the Portuguese Synagogue of Amsterdam to serve Spanish and Portuguese Jews from the Netherlands and Brazil. It has a sand-covered floor to remind Jews of the ancestors in the Iberian Peninsula. The cemetery there is, again, the oldest still in use in the Western Hemisphere. The Dutch ruins in the Caribbean. There's a historic synagogue, Sint Eustatius, and the ruins of the Hanan Dalim synagogue of 1739 still stand there on what's known as Synagogue Pad. There was an even older synagogue that existed in Suriname, built between 1665 and 1671. Unlike the Kuro Synagogue, these buildings are no longer in use. Then we go to Inamarco. So the Dutch West Indies invaded in 1624, but it was unsuccessful. The second invasion in Recife in 1630 was successful. And we know there was a new Christian there by the name of Simon Drago, who was the son-in-law of Rabbi Jacob Franco Lagarto. He bought a Sefer Torah in June 1633 in Amsterdam. Now, in 1634, the Dutch passed a law allowing for religious freedom, and the island of Inamarco is located just north of Recife, and it's under Dutch control from 1633 to 1646. Now, there was a Jewish pirate, or you might say he was an entrepreneur, Moses Cohen Enrique, who applied for permission to bring an organized Jew group of Sephardic colonists to Brazil. They arrived in Inamarco in 1635, estimated between 100 and 200 people. There's evidence that a synagogue was owned by Rabbi Lagarto. In Recife, we have these sugar plantations, which operate till 1654. A lot of new Christians. We know that Rabbi Fonseca was the rabbi of their synagogue, that there was another synagogue called Zur Israel and Magen Abraham on a nearby island. But the Dutch troops lost the colony of Recife in 1654, and it forced the Dutch Sephardic refugees to move to Curacao or to New Amsterdam. So the first Jews arrive in New Amsterdam, which today is known as New York, and Peter Stuyvesant, who's the governor, denies them permission to enter the city. They write to the Dutch West Indies Company, and who is the Dutch West Indies Company controlled by? Come on, Jews. That was not very smart of him. So of course they give access to the Jews. They establish a cemetery. A congregation is formed. It later becomes known, it's known today as She'ereth Israel. And other congregations form, but they're all based out of She'ereth Israel and She'ereth and relatives, because they're up and down the East Coast. So early synagogues, Mikveh Israel in Philadelphia, Mikveh Israel in Savannah, Thoreau Synagogue in Newport. These synagogues form, but they all have ties to She'ereth Israel, either through marriage or people in the congregation who have ties through shipping, the shipping industry. Notice these are port cities, and the Jews are very much involved in import, export in these port cities. So let's go back to expulsion immigration. So we know that Jews from Spain had ended up in North Africa, in the Middle East, in the Ottoman Empire. We know later they go to Amsterdam, to the Americas, and that the Spanish and Portuguese in the Americas, some of them have to go underground because the Inquisition is following them. So the conversos in South America, who are moving into South America, start to move north to Mexico and into the Americas. So this is a map. And if we look at this map, we see that Jews that go from Brazil have to start going north. As they're trying to escape the Inquisition, they're moving into Mexico, and from Mexico, they move into the Americas, Arizona, but mostly into New Mexico, although we do find converso communities as far north as Colorado today. All right, so now we're switching to family trees, okay? So let's talk a little bit about that. So did you know that there are 477 genealogies in the Torah? When you read the Torah, you're sitting there on Saturday morning, sometimes you might see so-and-so beget so-and-so beget so-and-so beget so-and-so. That's a family tree. And it's basically telling us, know where you come from to know where you're going, because roots are really important. And we need to connect families to future generations. I got involved with genealogies because I have a big family. I have 52 first cousins. People might say, oh my gosh, how did you keep? Well, we all lived in the same area and we all visited our grandparents on the weekends. So we all knew each other. But then my mother would say, oh, this is my cousin. And my father would say, this is my cousin. Well, suddenly I realized they had a layer of cousins that was above my layer of cousins. So I would sit at the dining room table with my mom and we would draw diagrams and she'd tell me about all her aunts and uncles, who they married, who their children were. And that was the beginning of my interest in genealogy because I needed to understand through a map how I was related to all these other people. And that's what we need to know when we're doing family trees. We need to understand how we're related to each other. And DNA is a great tool, but it doesn't tell us the how of people are related to each other. So I formed an organization called Sephardic Heritage Project. And what we do is we find records from Sephardic communities and we work on those records to try and harvest information. We want to find in a record, a Brit Milah record or a marriage record. When did someone get married? What was their father's name? What was the bride's parents' names? Who were the witnesses? Things like that. And we've been able to give those projects to Jewish Gen. We originally we also gave them to Sephardic Gen, and you can find them also on some of our records on the Israel IGRA website. So, but we'll talk more about that. We have a lot of projects that we've done. When you start with a family tree, I always tell people start from your generation. Start with what you know. The dates of birth, where someone's born, their full name, who did someone married, who were their children, what are their dates of birth, where were they born? Why is that important? Let's say you have somebody in your family and you're looking for a birth record. If you know where the person's born, it's easy to go and look up a birth record. When was someone married? Where were they married? Who married them? Fill in your family tree with as much information as you know. I recommend using software. I personally use Family Tree Maker software because it connects to Ancestry and Family Search. But I, definitely use software. I do not recommend putting family trees directly on a website like Ancestry. I believe you should do it through the software and connect because that way you can keep the information private if you want to. I like to talk to elders in the family and just talk to them about their family history. First of all, they know names and dates, so they can fill in a lot of information, especially about their ancestors. Write down their stories, any anecdotes you can find, okay? Why did they emigrate? What were their occupations in wherever country their ancestors came from? What type of education did they have? What were the geopolitics? What was how did they live? What kind of housing did they have? What was their experience on the ship or when they came? Do they have any documents? Everybody's got this suitcase in the top of their closet, right? Or a bag with old documents and stuff like that. I had was doing my husband's family tree, and we had a photo we couldn't identify. So someone reached out to me and reached out to my son actually, and he said, "Your name is Simon Rafay." It's my son's name, and he's named after my father-in-law. He said, My great grandfather was Simon Raffay, and he had three daughters named Sada, Pauline, and Flora. And he was from Tangiers, and he was in the tobacco business. Well, this was too much for me because my father-in-law's father, uh, David Raffay, had two daughters, Pauline and Flora. He was in the tobacco business, and he was from Tangier. And this Simon Raffay was the same name as my son Simon Raffay, and it was just too many coincidences. Turned out this person had the same photo that I did, but the photo I had didn't have a label on it. We didn't know who this woman was. Turned out she had the photo and she had the name on the back, and it was my husband's great grandmother. So those photos can be really valuable in helping you trace your family tree and in helping you understand the family. So we've talked a little bit about that, economics, politics. What was the status of Jews? In Muslim countries, Jews had the status of dhimmi, which meant that according to the Quran, you did not have the same status as a Muslim. You had a protected status, and you would have had to pay a jizya, a poll tax, based on the number of able-bodied men in the community. The community would have been autonomous, so they had to keep their own records. There were no government records of births, deaths, marriages, nothing like that. Find that box. I was talking about it just a minute ago. Maybe there's old videos in the box, and you should convert them into a current MP file that you can use. Maybe there's a ketubah. Find these records of your family. Somebody has this box or this bag, or scan the photos that are in your closet, because and identify who's in the picture, or as many as you can. I just said I don't believe in putting it directly on the web. You can if you want to, but I like the Family Tree Maker software. There is plenty of software out there, but that will allow you to make charts, download data, export the data, export parts of the data. This is an example from Family Tree Maker of a family. I was able to put the women in pink. The women's squares are rounded, the men are squares. I can choose what I want to put in each square. So if I want to put birth, death, I can put marriage, I can put as much information as I want to in each square. I can put a title. I can even do a booklet in Family Tree Maker if I want to do that. Research surnames. So in most Sephardics have a naming pattern. First and second child are named for the father's parents. This is the way we honor our family. But for example, in Syria, many people had double surnames. So knowing the double surname helps you in understanding discrepancies in the family. These are obvious public records that most people would look for. You might look at immigration, naturalization, social security index, obituary, ship records. This is standard in working on a family history. So this is actually a record of a peddler, and this is his death record. And we couldn't find any information on him, and we finally found out that he had died of natural causes, and where he was buried, because we found this record. This is my grandmother's record for when she applied for naturalization. So you see the alien registration number on there. I was like looking for her ship record. I could not find it. And finally, someone pointed out to me this registration number. And from that, I was able to find her petition for naturalization. And in it, it says that she came under this name, Frida, spelled Frida, Shma, Schma. Now, I knew her as Frida Sha'alo, see, which was her maiden name. Her married name was Frida Misri. And I was like, where did that name come from? Right? Because I knew her as Frida Sha'alo. And so I called up one of my elderly cousins, and she explained that in the old country, The name was actually Shakalo, if they had dropped the C in the middle, and the double surname was Shakalo Shema. So Shema was a transliteration of Shama, and that's how that name came, but I never would have found it if I didn't find this record. Then from that, I was able to get her ship record, and I found out that she came in June 1907, that she came with her brother, and that she went to live with her sister who was already here in the country. And this shows this shows the family. So here, and then this is my grandfather. So my grandfather came in June 1908. We had this family thing, and they're living, see, she is her Frida, and they're living with her sister, whose name is Morhaba. So you see that you get a lot of information from this. So as they're newlyweds, they're living with, according to the census, they're living with her sister. This is my grandfather. This shows where he was working when he came. He was working for Isaac Shalom, who was a big patron in the community. And this is his record of registration for the war. I didn't understand why he wasn't naturalized until much later, and why his port of entry was New York when was upstate New York. I just didn't understand it. And then I realized that he traveled a lot for this Chinese linen importing company, and he couldn't meet the 5-year minimum. And the witness to him was so this is another record. This was Isaac Shalom, and it says that he came. Another one I couldn't find. Turns out he came under this name, Isaac spelled I-S-A-K, Shalon, C-H-A-L-O-N. Never would have found it if I didn't find this petition for naturalization. So there's a lot of things you can find. So we have a lot of sources for Sephardic genealogy. I'm going to switch my screen now to some of them. I want to show you on JewishGen how to find records on JewishGen. But we also have the Israel Genealogical IGRA. Farhi.org is an excellent source of information. Much of the information on JewishGen is through the Jeffrey Malka collection, which came from Sephardic Gen.org. Because Jeff Malka is retiring, most of those databases have been moved to other websites, including JewishGen, which makes things wonderful for us. If you go to the website SephardicHeritageProject.org, I have a list of hundreds of sources of information. Understand that in the Ottoman Empire, there's very little before the 20th century because all of the records the communities were autonomous. There are definitely records online for Amsterdam and Dutch Brazil. Websites like Ancestry, Family Search, the Spanish archives, the Portuguese archives, all have wonderful information. These are my books, but before I go to questions, I'm going to change my slides to see if I can do this successfully. Abrami, I might need you to help me with this. I'm gonna stop this. Oh, let's see if I can just switch. Can you see this screen now? This is the SephardicHeritageProject.org website. Can you see this?
No, I still see the PowerPoint.
Okay, so let me stop share, and I will start share with a different screen. So I'm going to start with JewishGen. Fine, where I put JewishGen? Oh, I have to switch this here. Okay, here we go. So this is, can you now see the JewishGen website?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm logged into JewishGen, and if you go to research, right, you go to Sephardic, you'll come to the Jeff Malka collection. So this was the collection that came off of Sephardic Gen and .com. You can also go to, there's a country search. Where am I going? Sorry, I had this a minute ago and then I forgot. Oh, country and topical databases. So this is another one. So here if you go, like, you can go to Jeff Malka Sephardic. You can also go to Syria. You can do a lot of different countries. I'm going to do Syria for a second because that's the one I know best. And these are databases that I contributed that were also in the Jeff Malka collection. So just so you know that these are here. So this is a Brit Milah database that we did through Sephardic Heritage Project. It has over 7,500 records. And when you search it, you can search. So I'm going to search by, my family's surname, which was Misri. And when I start the search, I can get all different kinds of information. I have the name of the person, the father's name, the date of the bris. And it's not the date of the birth, it's the date of the bris, right? And so these are all of that information that you can find, and it's really quite helpful. So this is one of the many databases. There's a lot really on Sephardic Gen. I'm sorry, on JewishGen. If we go here to Sephardic, to the Jeff Malka collection, let's do a search for, let's say, Toledano. Haven't done this, but let's see. I'm sure a lot will come up. So here, what's happening is you can search it. It's telling you how many records and in which countries they come from. So you've got the Balkans, the Caribbean, Egypt, France, Israel, Morocco, Portugal, right? Spain, Turkey, and how many records. So let's say you go to Turkey. There's one record in Turkey, and you click on that record. It's going to give you the information on that person. So a wealth of information about Sephardic Jews from on JewishGen. I want to just take you now. Can you see the Sephardic Heritage Project website now? Or do I have to stop and start again?
Yes, I see it.
Okay. So if you go on this website, okay, SephardicHeritageProject.org, I have a tab called Resources. So in Resources, you see Sephardic Genealogy websites, journals and books that we recommend, Facebook groups. So if you go to Sephardic Genealogy websites, the list is endless. I mean, really, there's so much here, and you can go to these websites and really look at them. So like here's Mexico Inquisition, right? You can go to the Portuguese archives. You can go to the Montefiore census. So you want to be able to, it helps to have information on where you're looking for information. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. And then, of course, if you wanted to go to farhi.org, which is another fabulous source of information, you can search by name. Now, understand that I'm putting in Dweck, which is a common surname, that you can understand that that these are trees that are contributed. So, but what I like about it is, even though sometimes we're not sure 100% of the accuracy, I like that you can do a surname and then you can hover over and it'll tell you the family, children. It'll give you information without you necessarily clicking into each person, which is kind of really nice. Like here's Abood. You hover over him and all this information just pops up. It's really a wonderful website. And he's got a lot of other really interesting information here. With that, I'm going to stop share because I see the time. And I wanted to start looking at questions. So with that, I'm going to start looking at questions and see if I can answer things. Oh my goodness, lots of stuff here. Let's see how far I need to go back. Okay. Okay, so how did Jews arrive in Spain in the first place? They came because the Umayyad dynasty, the Muslims, there was a group of Muslims and that they followed from after the creation of the Muslim religion. They knew that they could live comfortably under Islamic rule. However, the dynasties that followed were not so kind. A lot of people think that the star patch that the Nazis had was a Nazi creation. It really wasn't. It was actually a Muslim creation because they had laws known as the Pact of Umar. And under the Pact of Umar, Jews had to wear distinctive clothing. They had to wear a badge. They weren't allowed to ride horses because those were taller. They couldn't have buildings as tall as Muslim buildings. So it was an issue, but they did live there for many, many centuries. Let's see. It's Manuel. It's not Man. Oh, you're telling me I misspelled. Okay. Please repeat the name and author of the book. It's The Portuguese Nation by Miriam Bodian. Portuguese Nation by Miriam Bodian, Bodian. Comment on Jews who went to France and how non-assimilated Jews reached the Pale. I don't think I can comment on that because that's not my area. Okay. I've spent 20 years researching Sephardic men and women convicted within the British Empire and transported to Amsterdam. I'm not sure. Okay. It's recommending another book. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking at the question. Does anybody else know about Sephardic Jews in Australia? What was the name of the family tree software? Family Tree Maker. That's the one that I like, but there's lots of software out there, and I like it in particular. It's by Makiev, Makiev. I like it because it links well and it gives you a lot of, it's the only one I've ever worked with. And most genealogists use that particular software. It's very reasonable. It's like $50, $60 or something like that. Has anyone worked with Jews from Holland who went to Danzig? No. Maybe, I don't know if Michael is on this call. He might be able to answer that question. Michael Was. He's my co-chair. Any work on French Canadian crypto Jews? Wow. Another one I don't have an answer for. I think I got a lot of work to do when I get off this call. Izmir, we're actually getting ready to release. I don't know if Avrami wants to talk about it, but we've been working on some records from Izmir. Genie.com is another website. I know that a lot of people really like Genie. I'm looking for information about Jews in Jamaica who weren't pirates. I believe that there is information online about Jews from Jamaica. How do I find info on Jews from Turkey? Turkey's a big country, so you have to be more specific. I heard there was a big fire at the main temple and all the files were burned. It depends where you're talking about. What is known about Amsterdam Ashkenazi Jews who moved to Eastern Europe? Most of the Amsterdam records are online. It should be pretty easy to look for that. Okay, someone is saying, I think there's a difference between Sephardic Jews that moved or passed through Spain before moving elsewhere and Mizrahi Jews that stayed in Asia, Muslim countries without relation to Spain. Unclear. Are Syrian Jews part of the first or second Jewish branch? I don't know what you mean by Jewish branch. I will tell you that all Syrian Jews identify as Sephardic Jews. although some are identified as what they call pure Sephardi, which means that they can trace themselves to Spain. Not everyone can trace themselves to Spain. What about grave and cemetery records? We do have some cemetery records online. Lots and lots. A lot of communities have gone to apps. So, for example, the Mount Sinai community in Mexico City has an app that can be downloaded. I've seen many communities. The Syrian community in New York has an app. You just download the app and you can look up anybody on the app. There are cemeteries like Montefiore where you can just go to their website and you can do a search on their website. Also, Jobar has a lot of cemetery records from Sephardic communities around the world. I know we did the community in Bogota, Colombia. We did Mexico City. We've done Cuba, Venezuela. So just check Jobar, the Jewish Online Worldwide Burial Registry on JewishGen. You definitely can find a lot of stuff online. Let's see, I'm just about out of time. I don't know if there's a specific question that I should be looking at. Currently working on research on a documentary. But I think I may not have covered everyone, but I tried. So with that, Avrami.
Hey, Serena, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone appreciated it. I see the comments. There was a lot going on here. So thank you very much. Because this program was so well attended and there was such interest, I'm pleased to report that Serena will be back next week for another talk. This time it will focus on Syrian Jewish paths to freedom. And I hope you will all join us for what will surely be very interesting and engaging. The recording will be sent out hopefully before the end of this week. For those of you who have been part of the Jewish Gen Talk series over the last month, we're hoping that all of the videos will go out today. There will be a survey accompanying it. Please fill it out. Let us know how we're doing. If you have any suggestions for future programs, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that, Serena, thank you again, and we wish all of you a wonderful day. Take care.